Disparities, voting rights, Senator Joe Manchin. There's a lot on the plate right now. And joining us to discuss this is Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II. He's the president of Repairers of the Breach and co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign. Reverend, it's good to have you join us. Welcome to the program. I want to begin first with your reaction to Senator Joe Manchin's position on the For the People Act.
It's absolutely hypocritical. You know, we said to folk in the Poor People's Campaign, you better get a handle on Joe Manchin. Back in February, we met with him with black and white people from West Virginia, and when he refused to support $15 living wage because of how it impacted 32 million people in this country who make less than 15, and over 40% of black people, and over 350,000 people in his own state. And we said, if he doesn't care about people in his own state, then we need to deal with this. Now, this man is saying some things that make no sense. In fact, we call it constitutionally inconsistent, morally indefensible, economically insane, and historically inaccurate. First, he's saying compromise. How do you compromise with people who are supporting bills in their own states that if the For the People Act was passed and the Voting Rights Act was passed, those things would be nullified? He says bipartisanship. But even if you got 59 votes, that would be 9 Republicans voting with Democrats, it still wouldn't break the filibuster. He says the filibuster brings us together. There's no history of that. The filibuster was used against anti-slavery bills, against women's suffrage, against labor rights, against the New Deal, against the civil rights. It has never worked in the way. So what this man is showing is that he basically is a puppet of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and a puppet of those who are on the upper echelons of society, the ruling class. And what he's doing is dangerous, not just to black people, but it's dangerous to the 140 million poor and low-wealth people in this country of every race, creed, and color, because he's hiding behind bipartisanship. That's what he's hiding behind. But think about this lastly. There's a meeting supposed to be tomorrow with certain civil rights leaders. And before that meeting, he puts out a thing that said, I'm anti the For the People Act. I'm not going to break the filibuster. You know, it's high time that what Manchin faces, and that's why we're marching on him in West Virginia next Monday. People from West Virginia, from the hollows to the hood, black and white, said it's time to make it known he doesn't represent West Virginia. And his positions are undermining and will serve to undermine this democracy. He will empower people to get elected, who then, once they get elected, will vote against health care, will vote against living wages, will vote against voting rights. This is fundamentally wrong, and Manchin should not only be ashamed of it, he is just wrong in what he's doing, and it is going to hurt the most vulnerable people. That's why we have to stand up to him.
You know, Reverend Barber, to your point, you have once been quoted as saying some issues are not left versus right or liberal versus conservative. They're issues of right versus wrong. Is that what you intend to say when you march on Joe Manchin next week?
Indeed, and not only, and I want you to know, West Virginians called us. I mean, white West Virginians and black West Virginians, and said, we're sick of this. Come there, and then we're going to go to D.C. on the 23rd. We're going to take busloads of people from Kentucky and from West Virginia to have a moral march on Manchin and McConnell. The 15th Amendment says that nobody should abridge or take the right to vote. When he says he doesn't want to pass bills to protect the right to vote, he's saying, I'm not even going to uphold what I swore to uphold on a Bible. When he claims that a bill is not a good bill unless it's bipartisan, that history doesn't follow that. A lot of times in this country, we had to pass bills against recalcitrant and groups of politicians who wanted to stay locked in the past. They wanted to have a pre-Civil War or a pre-Civil Rights interpretation of the Constitution. And somebody had to say, no, voting rights and living wages are not about left and right. It's not about partisanism. It's about right versus wrong. And when we're seeing the worst attack on voting rights that we've seen since Jim Crow, when we see James Crow Esquire attacking voting rights like it's happening in these states, and it's attacking in a way that will hurt black people and disabled people and women and young people and Asians and Native people. I mean, this is some dangerous stuff to our democracy. And for him to act like we elected Joe Manchin president as opposed to Joe Biden, and for him to to hide underneath this concept of bipartisanship is just, it's just wrong, man. It doesn't fit. I keep wondering who has a thumb on him. Who's really funding him? What is he really up to? Because he can say all he wants that this is about America. No, what he is doing is anti what's good for America, and he's acting more like he's in the pocket of McConnell than he cares about the people of his own state.
And of course, Mitch McConnell has made it very clear that he wants to stop Joe Biden, just as he stated with Barack Obama when he was served as president. Now, for years, Reverend Barber, you've been calling for a third Reconstruction. Explain to our viewers what you mean by that and what you'd like to see take place.
Yeah. And the reason we got to have a third Reconstruction is because of the way people like McConnell and Manchin argue. Think about it, too. Manchin had 8 years to fix the Voting Rights Act since 2013. Has he done anything? No. No. Has McConnell? No. So when you have that kind of stalemating, we need a third Reconstruction. Now, the first Reconstruction was in the 19th century when black and whites came together and changed the country after slavery. The second Reconstruction is the Civil Rights Movement, but both of those were assassinated. Reconstruction means two things. It first means the masses of people decide to make the Constitution mean what it ought to mean, make our deepest moral values mean what it ought to be, and to not be prisoner of a past reality. The second thing of Reconstruction means is you fundamentally shift laws. And so if we have 140 million poor and low wealth people in this country, and 50% of our children are poor and low wealth in the richest nation in the world, that ought to be unacceptable. Systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, denial of health care, and the war economy should be unacceptable. So what we say in a third Reconstruction, we mean we need to change how we measure poverty so we get it right. We need full and full restoration of Voting Rights Act and an expansion of voting rights. We need a living wage. We need guaranteed income. We need health care that's connected to your body and not to your job. We need an infrastructure plan that reaches down to the poorest community and lifts from the bottom up. We need education to be a constitutional right. We need the rights of immigrants protected. We need to fully protect the rights of indigenous people. In other words, we need to reconstruct the nation from the injustices to the justice that is stated in our Constitution and in our deepest moral values. And we can't fail this time, because literally what I see and what we see, many of the 140 million poor and low-wealth people in this country, is what's at stake is not Democrats or Republicans, not whether the Democratic Party will succeed or the Republican Party succeed, but will America succeed? Will this democracy hold? Because you cannot have almost 50% of your people living in poverty and low wealth, and then a tax on health care and a tax on living wage, and think that that is a formula for domestic tranquility. That is a formula for domestic damage and domestic upheaval. And so we've got to change it, and we need to reconstruct the laws of this nation in a way that it lifts from the bottom and cares for all people, and the laws are not merely serving the elite and the wealthy aristocracy of this nation.
Reverend Barber, we know you've got to go, but I want to ask you real quickly. You will be in Elizabeth City, North Carolina this weekend for a nonviolent march demanding transparency and accountability in the death of Andrew Brown Jr. What are your concerns and what are some of your demands for that transparency and accountability?
The people have said clearly, release the tapes. The family hasn't even seen the tape. The family's lawyers haven't seen the tape. Number two, do a full investigation. We need the Justice Department to do a full pattern and practice investigation and investigate what's happening. We need, and if that investigation proves that there was murder, we need people arrested and treated as such. What you have in Elizabeth City is a man that was shot in the back, moving away from the police, and we have a DA that's inept. He has misquoted proper jurisprudence in these matters. And also, he said something at his press conference, the DA did. He said, we couldn't let him go. And our question is, what? Wait a minute, this is not the Wild West. This is not Dead or Alive. What do you mean you couldn't let him go? We want to know, what does that really mean? What did Andrew Brown know? What did he know about who was really involved in drug dealing in that community? What do the officers know? There are some serious questions in Elizabeth City that have to be answered. That's why people of every race, creed, and color and religion are coming together for a mass march on Elizabeth City this Saturday, because we cannot stop until there is truth, transparency, and justice.
Reverend, I want to thank you for being a part of today's program and bringing your insight and your valuable insight and your faith to us today on The World Tonight. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. God bless. Take care.